Good afternoon, everyone. Great panel here today. Just a word about myself, because from the moment you look at me and the moment you hear me, I'm obviously English, but I've been in Greece for the last 25 years. I'm a qualified Greek lawyer and I've been doing renewables in Greece for 23 years now. If I can just ask the three of you to just briefly introduce yourself and what you're doing in Greece.
Sure. Thank you very much, first of all, for remaining with us. It's always difficult this late in the day. We'll try to give you our sort of hindsight on the Greek market. My name is Ypatios Moysiadis. I'm the managing partner in Wattcrop. Wattcrop is a development platform doing solar, onshore wind and storage. And as of last summer, we are part of the solar generation Gkiaouris family. And what we do at the moment is we have about a gigawatt of generation pipeline and also a gigawatt of storage within the Greek market.
Josh?
Josh Matthews, Senior Investment Manager at Cubico, investing in the EMEA region, and since the start of 2020 I've been looking at the Greek market. And we've built up a portfolio of just shy of 100 megawatts of operational solar, of operational wind, and we're looking to expand into the solar market as well.
George?
Hello everyone, good afternoon. I'm EBRD's regional head for energy for Southeast Europe, responsible for EBRD's energy investments and policy activities in Southeast European region. And my name is George Gkiaouris, but everyone is calling me George.
Let's start with you, Ypatios. The Greek market is very hot at the moment. The government have tried to winnow out some of the projects by introducing a fee for the initial production license, and they've just imposed a bond for projects which are at mid-range stage. Is the development sustainable?
The Greek market is burned. It's not even overheated. It's beyond that. I think the last sort of figures we had was about 100 gigawatts of applications for production license in a market that is about 18 to 20 gigawatt hours annually. So is the development sustainable? Yes, and I think that discussing also between us, you wouldn't find Greece being any different from any other market. The key criteria for a project to be sustainable or not, for a developer to be sustainable or not, is really the same as everywhere else. Do you have grid? Do you have a feasible route to market? Yeah? And how do you control your capex and your devex? So how cheap can you buy it? So if you have that, and if you are an organization that can leverage that, then no matter what is happening around you, if you control those sort of factors, then yes, you can continue to develop, but also development in Greece, it's a long-term development. So if somebody is looking at it in an opportunistic way that I'm gonna come in, develop something and flip, you're in the wrong market. So it's well, you know, it won't be this sort of development cycle, but it will be on the next. So on the one hand, we are fully supportive on these sort of restrictive regulations that the government is trying to bring in. We hope that it will eliminate a lot of the speculators. But on the other hand, it's a market for the brave and for the patient ones, and not a market that you can have a quick win.
Thank you. Josh, you've come in as an international investor. What for you are the key risks and the key concerns?
I fully support those things that you've just said there, because the Greek market isn't particularly different to other countries. Its stability of the regulation and clarity on what's going to come is one of the key things. I think it's one of the worst discussions as an investment person is having to go back to an investment committee and explain regulatory change. That always starts to unsettle people, and we all want to do sort of repeat transactions. So we need that stability there. The key learning point of Greece is just that grid, we're seeing real congestion in certain areas of the market. I think that's quite common in a number of European countries. So curtailment is likely to be something that comes up, and it's why storage is coming up in conversations again and again, that people are looking for a storage solution to try and deal with those things. And then going back, it's sort of CapEx and all these points are probably where our focus is at the moment. You're trying to secure the auction 12 to 18 months before you're ready to build in Greece. That's quite a long time to try and say to any of the turbine manufacturers or the panel manufacturers, I need to know where my pricing is going to be. It's just not happening.
Yeah, I mean, we had the last auction in May 2021, where the PV prices went down to 32 euro megawatt. We've got new auctions coming up in May. Presumably, we're not going to see those kinds of prices.
George, do you want to be the first one to
Yes,
take that?
happy to start. Yes, unfortunately, the overall supply disruption and the current inflationary environment has pushed the price for equipment for both solar and wind upwards. So the projects that we see, for example, we see that for solar and wind EPC contracts, the prices have increased from 20 to 10% respectively since last year. We also see that the global sensitivity on the solar supply chain management and the issues associated with supplies coming from certain factories in China that are exposed to allegations of forced labor clearly do not help and push prices upwards. And with respect also to the Greek context, we believe that while there is a lot of boom on development and there are a lot of projects which are ready to build and participate in the auctions, a lot of developers may decide not to participate in the auctions, driven mainly from the high energy prices and the increased appetite for corporate PPAs coming from suppliers, energy industry, or traders at much more preferential terms than the prices that we've experienced in the auctions. So we may see less supply projects.
Yes. I mean, the first auction coming up is only 600 megawatt, of which a significant portion will be set aside for onshore wind. So this is a tiny drop in the ocean compared to the number of applications.
It is, yes. And if I can add to what George was saying, Virginia, is if we look at long-term 10-year PPAs, we will see that they do not necessarily reflect the levels of the current prices. I can give you ranges. We're talking anything between 44 to 46 euros per megawatt hour, including balancing costs, on a 10-year term PPA at the moment in Greece. Also, again, reflecting to what George said, there is a huge interest from corporate off-takers, but as yet we haven't seen any true corporate PPAs being signed. We are seeing vertically integrated PPAs being signed, so companies that they have both the generation and the retail. And there is a huge educational curve that companies like us that we are engaging with corporate PPAs, we need to take them through, explaining the contracts, the conditions. However, on the flip side, we recognize that there is a bit of there is willingness in the corporate PPA off-takers to share some of the risks, especially that are related to capex, to the grid costs, and so on and so forth. So there is willingness to share that sort of risk if they are, of course, able to secure a more beneficial PPA rate.
So who are the off-takers in Greece?
First of all, we can say that there are some of the big metallurgy producers, like the foundries and dairy industry, even on the retail side, supermarkets, large hotel chains, which are very sort of, they peak in the summer. You don't have, obviously, the industrial capability that Germany or Italy or the UK has. And that's also why there are a lot of serious players that also looking at sleeved virtual PPAs that do not necessarily are directly with Greek off-takers, but more with international off-takers.
Yeah.
I would say that it's the utility PPA is probably the first step in that journey. Credit worthiness is probably going to be a key concern. I think to some extent you've got the local Greek banks who are probably very comfortable with their local Greek firms. They've already probably got very large credit lines to them. So they'll look at their credit risk for that company maybe very differently to an international investor coming in and
yes, because there are of course very few electricity suppliers in Greece who are not part of large conglomerates who have their own generation and their own supply and cover the whole range. So it'll be interesting to see whether there are private suppliers building up who are not connected with companies that already have their own generation capacity.
Yeah, we see when it comes to banks, we see that there is some relative comfort with a small merchant mix. So we're discussing, I would say, situations where you would go 80% for PPA, 20% merchant. So there is relative concern about that. But also the Greek banks are going to be the first sort of reference point for everyone that wishes to get any sort of finance for the projects. Now, given the concerns we have in the supply chain industry, in the panel manufacturers, I think we received prices yesterday which were turnkey at about 60 euros per megawatt at the moment from EPCs, which is quite high, much higher than anticipated. And I know that there is also a lot of concerns of people and developers that they're putting their projects on hold until they can buy cheaper. So there's always that sort of element into the equation as well.
Although, of course, the government is pressing companies to move forward, and there's going to be the years where you sit on projects in Greece are passing due to the requirement for grids and the requirement to speed up the environmental applications. So,
yeah, the bonding requirements.
yes, the bonding requirements are significant.
Yeah, 35,000 a megawatt for this period from the certificate of production through to your grid connection. That's quite a significant cost that you've got to sit there. Hopefully that's going to push the industry to professionalise and push out the speculative developer to some extent. But I think in terms of the corporate PPAs, I think one thing, it's going to lend itself to solar because of the production volatility of wind. I think as an equity investor that if you did the 80% on a PPA, 20% merchant, well, you're probably going to be giving all of your PPA revenues to the bank, and you're just going to be sat there as an equity investor taking after the bank and taking all of the volatility risk in the market, which I think it probably lends itself now to lowering your gearing, taking yourself maybe even going fully unlevered. We're starting to hear people talk about that. I'm not sure people are quite ready to write the size of checks that will need to be there. I think that'll be a challenge, but the solar market is probably where you're going to see the first of those projects coming through.
So, George, you as a banker, the Greek banks are very aggressive at the moment. They're well funded and they're very keen on this work.
Yes, I would say I agree. The four systemic Greek banks are quite comfortable and have a high appetite for renewables, especially renewables that have a CFD contract. However, we see our role increasing when projects are exposed. Our role, the role of EBRD and institutions like us increasing when projects are moving more to corporate PPAs or are exposed to merchant risks. Because the commercial banks may increase the size of their loan portfolio and they want to share also the risk, especially for some of the upcoming large developments in renewables. And on that point, maybe let's give you a bit of an overview of what we have done in Greece so far. So during the last 5 years that we've been operating in Greece, we have invested more than 670 million in 12 energy projects in Greece. And working together with commercial banks in project financing. But however, we've also invested through capital market transactions in bonds and we've done equity investments. For example, we financed the largest solar PV plant, Hellenic Petroleum's PV plant in Kozani, 204 megawatt, and we've also invested heavily in bonds and equity for the Greek utility DPC to help them accelerate their renewable investment program. Recently, we also start receiving calls to help sponsors finance sponsors at the parent or the holding level. So we are happy with some strong sponsors to help them raise the equity or provide equity bridge loans, EPLs, or even support portfolio financings. And finally, I will add that since last December, we have signed with the Greek Ministry of Finance an agreement to help them deploy 500 million euros of the Greek Recovery and Resilience Facility.
Yeah.
This EU's facility to help EU member states recover from the COVID pandemic. And what it means in practice is that we can support renewable projects. This is one of the priority activities to be supported by the RRF by financing together with the RRF in two tranches. So one tranche provided by the RRF at concession margin, lower margin, and a parallel tranche provided by EBRD own funds or commercial banks at the same terms, by PASU, with market terms when it comes to pricing. The main requirements is for projects, when we apply the concessional financing is to meet EU state aid rules, and of course this concessional financing cannot exceed 50% of the project cost. So we hope this also new instrument will have some of the more risky projects.
So these projects are by definition projects that don't have CFDs?
Yes, because otherwise it's already an implicit support, operating support, you cannot
Yes.
second.
You've already got one there. Yeah. Thank you. Has anyone seen any? We haven't seen any international banks actually signing off yet. No.
No.
No. The only banks lending into Greece are
There's a lot
still.
of international bank probably into,
Yes.
but not yet signing
Yes.
any products.
So yes,
As soon as it goes investment grade, I think you'll see them all come back. They're sat there,
yeah,
they're all prepped, ready. So.
yeah, and I certainly see international investors bringing their banks. They're dipping their toes in the water, but
Yes, I think there's international banks now providing some of these bonds,
yes,
which is the sort of first step into understanding the regulatory risks, etc.
yeah,
But no one's ready to non-recourse finance.
yeah. So I think one of the main practical problems that Greek projects have got is something that you've already both mentioned already, grid and grid capacity. George, is there going to be investment, is the bank going to be supporting investments in grid?
Yeah, we have also strong appetite, and we see that in many markets that you cannot accelerate renewables unless, of course, you start investing in the grid. So we have a large appetite to invest and in strengthen the grids, and we hope we can do that also.
And it's one of the stated aims of the government for the funding on the RRF is to invest in grid upgrades.
There are issues though, and speaking with both the IPTO and the head node, the DNO, so the TSO and the DNO, both on distribution and transmission level, both companies are facing similar planning and licensing issues when they do infrastructure programs. So there is no regulatory framework which supports those big infrastructure programs with new substations, cable laying. People are just stuck on the municipal employee somewhere and they cannot get the program on route. So that's number one. And number two, I think when again it comes to grid, we will see changes very soon. For example, there is no curtailment in Greece right now. So a generator can export 100% of their generation capacity. So the grid operators are bringing in curtailment routes, and this will allow for more capacity to be connected to the grid. So that's number one. Number two, we're still waiting for the framework of energy storage. The government has announced that there is a requirement for grid support for about 700 to 800 megawatts. We feel, looking at other markets and the lessons learned from other markets around Europe, that this is an extremely conservative figure. I think we're going to be reaching pretty much 50% of the required installed capacity. I think by the end, we're going to have about 10 gigawatts of storage in the country. We're going to see the new national energy plan being revised very soon, as we discussed actually. And we're going to see even more infrastructure that is driven from the storage side, because storage is also looked upon from developers as an opportunity to reduce joint or costs of the joint point of connections. So when you join up your generation plus storage, you're reducing that. And the final bit I have to say for the grid and the storage is that we're looking in legislative change. So there will be a requirement for certain projects that they want to compete in specific tenders, and that there will be a requirement to have at least 20% of the installed generating capacity in storage for 1 hour. So if you have a megawatt, you have 200 kilowatt storage capacity for 1 hour. This will be something that is up and coming. So we see all these sort of changes coming into the market, and I think we need also to drive the investment together with IPTO and academy. It's not just it's not just their sort of thing. I think we need to help them, because I feel sometimes that they're just bogged down on, they cannot move, they don't know how to move.
But obviously there have been significant investments in the grid though, and most of the islands are now connected. So that's made a huge difference to the cost of supplying electricity across Greece.
Yes, and if I can add to that very quickly, I think the role of Greece, looking at a recent study from Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, is that Greece has the potential to be the largest net green energy net exporter per capita in Europe. And to do that, you need interconnectors. So there's 2 huge interconnectors coming in, one with Egypt, the other one with Cyprus and Israel, and also interconnectors going into neighbor countries with Italy, Albania, Bulgaria, Turkey, North Macedonia, and all the rest. So there is infrastructure going on, but also on the flip side, and I think we were discussing that on between us, the grid is so congested that everybody's looking to connect projects to 150 and 400 kV lines. I see 2 issues there. One, licensing. You need, I don't know how many years to license substations and cable routes. And number 2 is that there's very limited knowledge in companies who can actually deal with that sort of infrastructure work, right? So it's not, when I hear developers, and you have a lot of cowboys, unfortunately, as other markets, but we're going to connect there. Well, that connection might take you actually 7 years, if you connect, right? So what you have is bigger companies, we're doing it as well, that you form consortiums and you join up on putting forward a joint point of connection on already licensed projects.
Shared substations
Yes, it's clearly
increasingly common. So the majority of projects now that we're looking at probably will need a shared substation. It's also if you looked at what parts you panel prices, probably everybody's going to get very, very similar panel prices, or if you're doing wind, you all get the same turbine price, largely the same things. The thing that can differentiate your project will be your grid connection cost. And I think that will be the thing that makes you successful in auctions or PPAs, is if you've got a cheaper grid connection cost. That's probably
And you mentioned DevEx as well, if you want to elaborate on that as well.
Yeah, I think that speaking to the different people, and you do see a real range of developers in Greece, and the level of DevEx costs that being asked for, but also the spend. I think that's probably one of your best indicators as to the quality of your developers, is to ask them for some track record and what their DevEx spend has been. Seeing, in fact, multiples out between them, between good and bad.
But also the ESG criteria. For example, looking and discussing about PPAs, PPA off-takers are more and more concerned with the ESG criteria we use when we do site selection. So things like whether you develop or not in Natura 2000 areas or AONB's areas of outstanding natural beauty, whether you have a good engagement with the local communities. And unfortunately, these are especially from local developers that don't have international experience. These are things that are very easily overlooked.
Yes.
And that's why you have a lot of pushback from the local communities. Suddenly you see your village surrounded by, mirrors on fields, and you say, well, what's going on here? So there is a natural sort of pushback on everything renewables, especially on the rural areas. So it's extremely important for us to be not only engaging the local communities, but also proving that we can work with them and sharing the benefits with them. So the ESG criteria are becoming more key to the development cycle, especially if you're going on PPA route.
We saw the fires in the summer, the feedback from local stakeholders. There was a perception it was renewables that were taking away the forests of things.
Yes.
But there's a lot more management and stakeholder engagement that needs to be done.
Yeah, and in particular, I mean, the priority area for renewables is in the old lignite areas that you see is now withdrawing from. This is your hometown.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sensitivity there, but there's a lot of incentives to build.
Yeah, I think both Yorgos and I were sharing the same sort of hometown and area. I think there is a perception that the people are losing because of the close down of the mines and the power stations. There is booming unemployment, and local politicians or specific stakeholders are pushing forward the agenda that it's the renewables' fault that the factories are closing. So again, on our side, there is a positive agenda that we're putting on the table, where we're engaging the local press or the local people that saying this is not true. But it's also our fault as an industry that we went in these areas as PPC did. And PPC someone can argue that, okay, they own the mines, so they can do whatever they want. But it's down to us, it's down to Lightsource, it's down to Enel, it's down to LP, all the other companies that have invested in this area to go and engage. So I'm engaging the local communities, and people are coming to me and saying, you're the first sort of company that comes to us to discuss things when we don't even know. We are misinformed, we don't know what you're doing and how you're going to do it and what sort of impact this will have in our day-to-day lives. So it's not just, we cannot ask everything from the government or from anybody else. We need to look at what sort of mistakes we're making, and we need to look at best practices in other countries and enforce these best practices in what we do in Greece. So it cannot be a colonial sort of situation where I go in, your polygon, and now this is mine, I claim that sort of thing. That's the wrong approach, isn't it?
Yeah. Great. We've got 3 minutes left. Are there any questions from the floor? Yep.
My name is Catherine Poseidon. I cover strategy for Italia and Europe and Africa. I wanted to ask you about corporate PPAs. So I think now it's been more than a year since the first semi-corporate PPA that, as you said, was announced within one vertically integrated entity, EMEA. And then in September we also saw this announcement that there would be a green pool PPA structure. I wonder, from your perspective, given the fundamentals, what is holding back the corporate PPA market? What needs to happen before we finally see the first one? Once that happens, is there going to be kind of a knock-on effect? Is everyone waiting for the first mover? Are we waiting for the green pool?
I think, first of all, legally speaking, amongst the there was a restriction until the end of last year that you could only have 20% as bilateral PPA for any supply that's had more than 4% of the market. So they were attempting to reduce the number of bilateral PPAs amongst the suppliers to increase the competition in the market. But that has now been abolished. So.
Hopefully we will be able to announce the first corporate PPA in Greece very soon, as several of GIG. But that remains to be seen. I think the holdup is more the education cycle that you need to go with the local investors and the banks, absolutely, and the banks, rather than anything else. And it's a long process. There are not many corporate players that can do that. And again, you see even the corporate structures, you see very old companies, very sort of centrally managed from families, very sort of old style, conglomerates that they still control things, and it's very like a control freak. You have a CEO who's a control freak. So you suddenly negotiate and you discuss now, and then it takes another month to have another discussion or something. So it's that sort of situation. So there is a big education cycle that Greece will have to go through. But as I said, I think the opportunity is on sleep virtual PPAs, not as much with the local players, but also with international players.
But I think the green pool will be an interesting educational exercise, I think, to try and get people to engage.
I think you've also got to remember what the other side of the table have been going through with like COVID. They've probably been trying to sort out their core business. Their PPA strategy probably isn't the top of their management's focus in the last couple of years. So tourism, well, that hasn't been where am I going to get my power from, it's where am I going to get my joys from. So I think you've got to look at what the other people and what their pressures are.
Any other questions? Good question. Very good question. I think your estimate was?
I think we have right now grid offers which reach about 8 gigawatts in the market from the TSO. But we still have a big hold up on actual projects being built. I think last year there was 1.5 gigawatts added to the overhead system. I want to be very optimistic. I will say that we will see a lot of projects being built, and if you see what happened in other countries, we will follow. Greece will follow the same sort of route. So I think we're going to be reaching the 25, maybe even 30 gigawatts in a 10-year period from now. And we will see Greece going 100% green, like Portugal will, much faster than anticipated. And this will also drive. This will also be driven from storage, the electrification of vehicles, the electrification of energy, and unfortunately, events like Ukraine, which I wish our politicians were listening to us 10 years ago when we were banging that drum that you need to grow independent.
George?
Yes, I will add, it's probably good to basically set this growth potential in the overall context of the transformation that is taking place in Greece. And Greece is going through a major transformation of its electricity sector. I think the driving force is the decision to close down 4 gigawatts of lignite-fired power plants, the latest by 2028 or 2025 as the most recent announcement. So this, together with the actually interconnection of the main islands like Crete, and also, as Ypatios said, the electrification of the economy, even transport, is increasing the need for replacement capacity. Based on, maybe I will not be as optimistic as Ypatios, based on the, and I'll use the quote of the National Energy and Climate Action Plan. It's estimated that approximately 8.7 gigawatt of new renewable capacity will come online by 2030. Renewables, battery storage, but also some selective CCGTs will cover the need of that replacement capacity. Clearly, the needs of new investment in renewable to meet domestic demands and the fact that Greece is a net importer, more than 10% of the Greek domestic demand is covered through imports, is driving the growth and the development of renewables and solar.
I have to mention though that this was back in 2019. That target was set in 2019.
Yes.
That's why I'm saying that in 3 years, the world has moved so far that I think that's why I'm saying we will see a renewal on that sort of target very soon.
Yeah. Any last questions? Or I can stop. Okay. Well, we're even on time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.